There are people who shine without even realizing it. They move through the world quietly, with no desire to stand in the spotlight, no intention of dazzling anyone. And yet wherever they go, something shifts, something awakens. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's undeniable. It's as if the air around them becomes a little lighter, as if something in the atmosphere changes simply because they're present. They don't know exactly what it is that sets them apart. They carry a feeling inside, a subtle, persistent knowing that something within them is different, not better, not above anyone, just different. And they may never find the right words to explain it. They may never fully understand it themselves, but still, it's there. They are the ones who have faced the darkness, not once, but many times. And each time they've returned, they've brought back a little more light. And when that inner light begins to shine, it doesn't show up with fireworks. It appears in small, subtle gestures, in the kind of presence that gently shifts everything, in the comfort of a silent glance. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 signs that your light is something truly special and the world is beginning to notice. Sign 1. People feel peaceful around you without knowing why. They're drawn to you even when you're not seeking attention. They open up, telling you things they've never said out loud before. They sit in silence with you and still feel understood. They can't explain it, but something about your presence soothes them. It's not that you have all the answers. It's that you've learned how to hold space without filling it with noise. Your light doesn't try to fix. It simply stays. It doesn't judge. It embraces. And in a world where almost no one truly listens, that becomes a healing force. You start noticing even strangers tell you their stories. Someone might say, "I don't know why, but with you, I can just be myself." And that's when you realize it's not about what you're doing. It's about who you're becoming. Sign 2. Your presence unsettles those who live inauthentically. You don't have to say anything at all. Just being there is enough. And yet some people begin to distance themselves. They become defensive, criticize you without reason, or simply vanish from your life without explanation. What's happening is that as your light becomes more visible, it begins to shine into other people's shadows. Your authenticity makes them uncomfortable because it reminds them of what they've been avoiding within themselves. Your calm disturbs those who live in chaos. Your honesty bothers those who built their identity on illusions. And even though this might hurt at first, over time, you realize it's not true rejection. It's a natural response from souls that aren't yet ready to face their own truth. This isn't about changing yourself to be more likable. This is about honoring your path and allowing life to naturally filter out the energies that no longer align with you. That discomfort you cause is not a mistake. It's undeniable proof that your light is working. It's not a flaw. It's confirmation that your light is doing its job. No effort, no words, no permission needed. There's a kind of discomfort that doesn't come from conflict. It comes from truth. It's that quiet tension that shows up when your mere presence begins to unravel the masks of others, even if you haven't said a word. You're not trying to accuse or confront anyone. It's just that your energy no longer matches what's built on falsehood. You've walked through so much pain. You've fallen, you've shattered, and you've rebuilt yourself from the inside out. Now, you can smell what's fake from miles away. And the most surprising part is, you don't have to call it out. Your authenticity already does that for you. You can tell when someone starts defending themselves without reason, when people compete with you though you're not competing with anyone, or when they just disappear from your life because being near you forces them to face what they've long ignored. And that hurts, especially when they're people you once loved deeply. But when your light begins to shine, life becomes precise. It starts removing those who can't walk with you in this new vibration. Your energy no longer supports connections based on fear, convenience, or emotional dependence. Your soul becomes more selective without effort because you no longer feel the need to belong where you once forced yourself to fit. And even if, at first, it feels like you're ending up alone, that solitude is actually the sacred space where true connections are made. So if your presence begins to make those who live through appearances uncomfortable, don't see it as punishment. It's a clear sign that your light is starting to work from the deepest place within, not to persuade, not to impress, but simply to exist. And the more you stay grounded in that light, the clearer it becomes how far you've come compared to what others still aren't ready to face. This isn't about spiritual arrogance, nor about feeling superior. It's about realizing that not everyone is prepared to resonate with you, because your light doesn't only illuminate the beauty, it also reveals what's hidden, unfinished, or unconscious. And for many, that is unbearable. The way you simply look at things, without judgment, but with depth, already triggers resistance in those who've built their identity from fear or from image. Your peace disrupts their defense mechanisms. Your honesty exposes dynamics that only worked because no one dared to name them. Your silence interrupts manipulation patterns that once went unnoticed. And now, your energy has become a mirror, not one that reflects perfection, but one that reveals authenticity and that makes people uneasy. Because when someone still lives identified with their wounds, they cannot bear the reflection of someone who has begun to heal. But this is exactly when something magical happens. When you dare not to shrink yourself. When you refuse to lower your frequency to be accepted. When you stop hiding your sensitivity just to avoid discomfort, something unexpected begins to unfold. You start attracting those who are also awakening, those who see your light not as a threat, but as a signal. And that's when you realize that the initial discomfort was part of the process. It was the universe clearing the path, so you wouldn't have to carry bonds that would only weigh you down. Your light was never meant to please everyone. It was meant to touch souls, and that will always shake things, but it also transforms them. Because the truth is, you didn't come to this world to keep everyone comfortable. You didn't come into this world to keep everyone comfortable. You came to break cycles, to remember what is sacred, to plant a new vibration, even if at first it feels like you're walking alone. Every time your light makes others uncomfortable, it's fulfilling a greater purpose than you can imagine. Because even those who aren't ready to receive you, deep down, feel the echo of what you represent. They won't always admit it. Many will hide it behind rejection, distance, or criticism. But inside, your presence leaves behind a mark, an unanswered question, a seed. And the most beautiful part is, you don't have to do anything extra to create that effect. Just be. Just keep turning on your inner light, without explaining, without waiting for approval, without asking for permission. You've reached a point where your energy no longer needs validation from the outside, because your guidance no longer lives out there, you carry it within. And every time you choose authenticity over acceptance, that inner guidance grows stronger. That doesn't mean you must become closed off or hardened. On the contrary, your light is also softness. It is compassion for those still asleep. It is patience for those who don't yet understand what you've already integrated. But above all, it is loyalty to yourself, to your essence, to the calling that becomes harder and harder to ignore. So keep shining, even when it disturbs others, because the ones who can't handle your light today may someday need it to find their own. And your light doesn't just change what's around you, it changes how you see. You begin to notice that certain conversations no longer feed your soul, that some family patterns now feel strange, like you're witnessing something that no longer belongs to you. It's hard to stay in places where the soul is dismissed, where everything is rushed or surface level, because without realizing it, you've started living from somewhere else. You no longer want to belong at any cost. Now you crave real connection, resonance, truth, and that internal shift shows up in every decision, every relationship, every silence you choose to keep. Someone who has lit their light can't dim it again without consequences. They can't lie to themselves without feeling it in the body, without sensing it in the soul. Because awakening isn't just awareness, it's an inner revolution that makes self-deception unbearable. At some point, betraying yourself hurts more than being alone. And that is another sign that your light is finally being recognized, even by you, because you begin to protect it, to honor it, to nurture it like a sacred flame. You know it's not pride, it's respect. It's gratitude for everything it took to get you here. Every fall, every dark night, every sacrifice prepared you for this moment, for this state of clarity, where, even if there are still wounds, you no longer define yourself by them. Where even if the world remains chaotic, you have found a point of inner calm that no one can take from you. Your light is special because it was forged in the midst of pain, and yet it did not turn bitter. On the contrary, it chose to shine. Your light doesn't shout, doesn't need to dominate. It is quiet, but steady. It's that presence that shifts the entire atmosphere without saying a word, that changes the mood of a room the moment you enter, that inspires trust in someone watching you, even if they can't explain why. And the most revealing part is that you are beginning to notice it too. Some people open up to you without knowing why. Others feel uneasy near you, even though you've done nothing, and some simply avoid you. Not because something's wrong with you, but because your energy reveals truths many aren't ready to face. Your light confronts them without trying, with their own shadows, their need to perform, to please, to hide how they really feel. That's why it's not that you're strange, it's that you're too real for a world full of masks. And that authenticity, though it may hurt, is medicine, is mirror, is guide. The most valuable part of all this is that you're not trying to enlighten anyone. You're simply learning how not to dim who you are. And that, though it may seem small, is a revolutionary act. Because while others shrink themselves to fit in, you choose to expand, even if it means letting go of what's familiar, even if it means walking paths that most people are too afraid to explore. Because your light isn't looking for approval, it's looking for purpose. And that's the difference between shining out of need and shining from truth. Signal 3. The silence begins to speak to you. When your light is rare and starts to show, silence is no longer just the absence of noise, it becomes a language of depth. You begin to find meaning in moments that used to slip by unnoticed. A sunset, an old song, the way the wind stirs the trees, everything begins to carry a message you can't quite explain, but you deeply understand. You no longer seek noise to feel alive. Now you choose the spaces where you can actually hear yourself, where the mind turns down its volume and the spirit finally gets a voice. You discover yourself becoming more introspective, more selective, less reactive. It's not apathy, it's wisdom. Because once your inner light turns on, everything outside of you is filtered through something new, through the lens of authenticity, through the question of what truly nourishes you, not what merely distracts you. And in the middle of that silence you once feared, you now find answers you didn't even know you were waiting for. You begin to realize that you don't always need words to communicate because your vibration says more than enough. Silence becomes your sanctuary, a space where you don't need to defend your truth or hide your sensitivity. It's in that quiet that your soul grows stronger, that your intuition begins to blossom, and without even noticing it, you start radiating a calmness that's contagious, a peace that doesn't come from the world, but from your connection to something greater. And what's most fascinating is that in that silence that once felt empty, you now feel held, as if an invisible presence is supporting you from within. You're no longer alone, even when you are. You no longer need explanations, because your heart is starting to trust something deeper than logic. You begin to notice your emotions settling more quickly, that you no longer react the way you used to, because you sense that everything follows a divine rhythm. There's a certainty forming in the unseen, a quiet feeling that you are being guided, even when you have no idea where you're going. And while the world keeps screaming outside, you choose the whisper of your soul. You realize you don't need more stimulation, but more connection. That clarity doesn't come from the outside, but from that sacred inner space that only reveals itself when everything goes still. That silence becomes your refuge, your gateway, and with time, you begin to understand that it's not just your mind calming down, it's your energy coming into alignment. And even though it can't be seen, it can be felt, it radiates, it's noticed, because your light, no longer distracted by what you're not, begins to shine upon what's always been inside you. And so, even in silence, you speak. Even without effort, you transform. Even without seeking, you begin to find. And that's when you realize you no longer need to prove anything, because the most powerful truths don't need to be imposed, they shine effortlessly. You don't have to convince anyone of your growth, your transformation, or your awakening. Your light starts to speak for you in every calm gesture, in each intentional decision, in every moment where you choose peace over the need to be right. It's a language with no words, yet its vibration is so pure that even those who can't explain it still feel it. The ones who stay in your life feel it, and so do the ones who leave. You also begin to attract different kinds of relationships, ones that feel more genuine, deeper, more aligned with the new frequency you're vibrating in. And it's not because you tried to change anyone else, but because you've transformed yourself. You turn down the noise of the world to turn up the volume of your own truth. Your silence becomes your power, your peace, your quiet rebellion. And that magnetism you now radiate has nothing to do with how you look or how hard you try. It's all about your soul, about the harmony between what you feel, what you think, and what you do. That's why, in this new chapter, you stop fearing solitude. In those moments, you can finally hear yourself. And in hearing yourself, you begin to meet who you really are. And meeting yourself changes everything. In that silent transformation, you slowly begin to see that even your wounds had a purpose. Not because they were fair, but because they pushed you back to yourself. They made you pause, look inward, and question everything you thought was solid. And in doing so, you awakened, not from drama, but from a fresh clarity, that no longer begs for validation. Because when your light starts to bloom, you understand that nothing ever happened by accident. The way you used to shrink yourself to be liked, the guilt for feeling different, the ties that drained your energy, every bit of that had to happen so you could learn to choose yourself. To realize your energy isn't an endless supply that others get to take without asking. It's a sacred flame, a temple that deserves protection. So this light that people now see in you wasn't born from perfection, but from the alchemy of all you've lived through. It's not a gift reserved for a few. It's what happens when you stop fighting who you are and begin to embrace every part of yourself, even the broken ones. That radical self-acceptance, that inner peace that no longer depends on what's outside, that's what truly makes you shine. Because your light isn't some future promise. It's what happens when you walk through your own darkness and refuse to give up. And the more you accept that your light comes from within, the more you notice that you move differently through the world. Not because of your clothes or your voice or any effort to prove who you are, but because your presence no longer depends on anyone else's reflection. Your center is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer react to every conflict from emotional urgency, nor exhaust yourself trying to keep connections that no longer support your evolution. Now, you understand that not everything lost is truly a loss. You've come to see that not all pain is punishment. You've learned to tell the difference between what genuinely brings you peace and what only distracts you from your emptiness. And that quiet wisdom, that inner strength that lets you say no with confidence and yes with your whole soul, is a clear reflection of your light. A light that doesn't aim to outshine anyone, but simply to illuminate your own path. A light that no longer compares, no longer competes. Because once your soul begins to heal, it no longer needs outside approval. It starts to grow its own inner truth. You no longer chase after likes, shallow compliments, or promises of love that fall apart when tested. Your energy is no longer something you give away without thought. Your presence isn't something you beg others to see. Now, your light has become a beacon, discomforting to those trapped in unconsciousness, but magnetic to those searching for a way out. Your gaze grows deeper, your voice calmer. Your decisions now align with what you genuinely want to build. Even your body begins to respond in new ways. You fall ill less often because you've stopped betraying yourself. The lines in your face soften when you stop carrying burdens that were never yours, and your steps feel lighter when you stop needing to control everything. People begin to notice. They can't always explain what they see. Some ask if you're doing something new. Others drift away without a word. But you, from this new place of clarity, understand. Not everyone is ready for the version of you that no longer dims her light just to fit in. That's why, when your light begins to shine through, it's not because you're doing more. It's because you finally stopped forcing yourself. And that authenticity, that calm, is worth far more than any mask you've ever worn. Sign 4. The vibration that begins to guide your every step. There comes a moment, subtle, yet deeply transformative, when you stop making choices out of fear and instead begin to feel a kind of internal compass quietly pointing you where to go and where not to. It isn't rational logic. It's not a strategy. It's a vibration. And that vibration doesn't shout, it whispers. It only emerges when you're brave enough to be still. When you stop chasing what you thought you had to become and start truly listening to who you already are. At this point, the things you once thought mattered start losing their grip on you. The goals society imposed on you, the paths others laid out for you, the shoulds you inherited, the demands of the persona you crafted just to get by, all of that begins to dissolve. And it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like relief. Your energy no longer resonates with the same things. It can't stand what's fake. It rejects anything soulless. And it craves more and more experiences that actually make you feel truly alive. You no longer need logical reasons to take a step forward. You just know when it's time. You feel it when someone's energy doesn't align with yours, even if you can't explain why. You feel it when it's time to pause, even if the world tells you to keep going. And that feeling becomes your new compass. It's as if you're finally moving in rhythm with your soul, as if life isn't about going further anymore, but about walking more faithfully toward yourself. And the most beautiful part? This vibration can't be faked. It can't be copied. You won't find it in books. It only arrives when you stop betraying yourself, when you start choosing yourself, even if it means disappointing other people's expectations. Because at this stage, you choose peace over noise, integrity over image, and what's real over what's accepted. Your light no longer needs a stage. It shines on its own. And whoever sees it won't ever forget it. When that vibration begins to awaken inside you, something shifts at a level far beyond your conscious mind. You stop wondering which choice is the right one, because now it's your energy that answers. You no longer decide out of urgency or lack, but from a place far deeper and quieter, your inner frequency. You begin to clearly sense when something resonates with you and when it doesn't. You don't need long explanations. There's no need to justify why a place unsettles you, why a person exhausts you, or why a goal you once chased with passion now simply doesn't matter anymore. Your soul feels it. And that feeling, the one you used to silence for fear of being wrong, has become your most reliable truth. You no longer betray yourself to fit in, nor do you seek approval to move forward. The old anxiety of getting everything right or not disappointing others starts to dissolve, because now you see how high the cost of not listening to yourself really is. And so, without making loud declarations, you become more selective with people, with decisions, with the places you go, and with what you allow to enter your energetic space. Even your body starts to speak differently to you. You feel lighter in some spaces, more tense in others. You notice how certain conversations lift you, while others drain you completely. And you begin to follow this invisible map that guides you through sensations you once ignored. The vibration you now emit begins to attract different realities, people who align with your frequency, opportunities that flow effortlessly, synchronicities that make you smile, because you know they're not coincidence. They vibrate with who you are now. Even when it hurts, you accept it, because you understand your soul is evolving, and those who can't walk beside you now simply belonged to an older version of who you used to be. This new vibration teaches you to move without fear, not because doubts don't exist, but because you trust. You've begun to inhabit your soul so fully that any path that contradicts it becomes impossible to follow. Your intuition becomes your compass, your peace, your confirmation, and your authenticity, the new filter through which you choose everything. None of this can be forced. It only arrives when you stop denying your truth. And then, the life that once felt uncertain becomes mysteriously clear, not because you know what will happen, but because finally, you know who you are. This is the expansion that begins when you no longer need anyone's permission. There comes a point on your journey when something inside you stops asking for permission to shine. It doesn't happen overnight, but it arrives with a silent strength that shifts everything. It's that subtle moment when you're no longer waiting for others to validate you in order to feel worthy, nor needing them to understand your path in order to trust that you're heading where you need to go. You stop seeking external approval, not because you no longer care. On the contrary, your sensitivity is still present, but it's no longer the compass guiding your steps. The need to fit in fades away, and in its place, a calm clarity emerges, an expansion from deep within that allows you to move freely, with presence and without guilt. You begin to speak with more truth. You don't shout. You don't impose. You don't explain yourself. You simply speak from what you feel. And though some may drift away, others will come closer. People who aren't threatened by your light, but inspired by it. You no longer need to belong to every circle, just those where you don't have to hide any part of who you are. You stop begging for love. You stop over-adjusting just to maintain connections. You stop dimming your energy to avoid making others uncomfortable, especially those who still don't dare to shine. Your energy begins to take up its natural space, and with it, your soul expands, unbound, fearless, and effortless, because now you understand. Your light is not a flaw to be concealed, but a gift meant to be shared. This expansion transforms your choices too. You no longer choose from a place of lack, but from a sense of inner fullness. You don't look for experiences to fill empty spaces. Instead, you nurture your life with what already resonates with your authenticity. The feeling is unmistakable. You're not patching up holes. You're inhabiting your internal abundance. The urgency fades too. You realize there's no need to chase what's meant for you. What's yours will find you, and you are ready to receive it without anxiety, without sabotage, without masks. This stage feels like liberation, a quiet rebirth where you finally see that there's nothing left to prove. Your worth isn't tied to what you do or how others perceive you. Your worth is in your essence, and that is no longer up for debate. When you arrive at this place, the world loses its grip on you, and you begin to hold a new kind of power over your world. The power to create from your center, not your wound. The power to choose what aligns and release what no longer does. It's then that you truly understand what it means to live with your light fully on, because that light, which is yours, no longer waits for permission. It just wants to be lived. And when you reach this level of inner expansion, every part of your life starts to realign from a different place. You no longer define yourself by what you own or the roles you play, but by the depth with which you inhabit your existence. Your gaze becomes clearer, more honest. You're not trying to impress, to please, or to prove your worth as if it was something others could grant you, because you've already claimed it, recognized it as your own. The decisions that once brought you anxiety now fall into place without drama. You can say no without guilt, and yes, without betraying yourself. You know how to walk away from spaces where growth is no longer possible, not out of hatred, but out of love for yourself. You don't react with violence, but you don't surrender either. You simply choose peace. And that choice, which once seemed selfish, has now become your sacred compass. Your connections shift too. Some quietly dissolve without blame. Others return stronger, deeper, because you no longer relate from a place of lack. You've stopped bargaining with your worth, and that changes the entire energy you radiate. You no longer attract from need, but from alignment. And yes, though you may sometimes feel more alone, it's not a sad loneliness, it's a full one, a powerful solitude, because now you know you have yourself. And that, for someone who once lived craving approval, is a kind of freedom no one can buy. Your creativity also awakens, not as a skill to display, but as a natural expression of your essence. You begin creating not for validation, but for the joy of creating itself. Your life force aligns, your thoughts become clearer, and your body responds with strength, presence, and fluidity. And yes, you begin to notice that everything flows, not because you found some magic formula, but because you let go of control. You released the urgency, the pressure, the harsh musts, and in that space, life began to meet you differently. Now everything moves with new rhythm, new flavor, new depth, because you no longer live from fear, but from expansion. When you stop forcing, not everything becomes perfect, but it does become more authentic and true to you. In a world full of appearances, that's self-love. If you felt these words spoke to your soul, don't ignore it. Your light is special and is beginning to shine. The world needs it. Leave me a comment if something resonated with you. I'd love to read it and accompany you in this awakening. Subscribe, activate the bell, and share this message with someone whose light is also beginning to shine. None of this is a coincidence. Your soul knows it.